Let's have some pleasure.
In life, aside from being balanced in our actions, it's also important to be balanced on how we view an issue, because how we view things determines how we relate to things. If you think something's all bad, you're gonna stay away from it at all costs. If you think something's all good, you're likely to embrace it, even when it's not serving you. And the truth is, everything has good and bad in it. The point is to take the good and throw away the bad. You knew that, right? You didn't think that being balanced was being was being good half the time and being bad half the time. However many minutes you behave, that's how many minutes you need to misbehave in order to be balanced. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. That's absurd. Being balanced is doing the right thing at the right time. Not being one-track minded, that I always do this. Because the problem with one-track minded pleasure is that it doesn't take long before the pleasure gets used up. Being balanced opens you up to infinite avenues of pleasure. And when you have infinite avenues of pleasure, the pleasure is infinite. It never gets used up. So if you tell yourself, never let anything bother you, that might sound like a good idea, because letting things slide is a good thing to do. Being bothered by things is not pleasurable. But understanding ideas in a balanced way tells you that you can use anything for good or for bad. You just need to pinpoint what the good is and use it only for good. So when is not letting something bother you good? If you're walking down the street and someone frowns at you, should you let it bother you? Of course not. Don't be so petty. What about if someone cuts you off when you're driving? Same thing. No need to be petty. Being bothered is not pleasurable. So why let the other person rob you of pleasure? That's the first category. When should you not let things bother you? When they're petty. But then there are bigger things, like if someone totals your car, should you let that bother you? Will it help the situation that you're bothered? No, not really. Because you can get the insurance money whether you're angry or not. You can be bothered and file the insurance claim, or not be bothered and file the insurance claim. Either way, you'll be compensated the same amount. So what's the point in being bothered? That's the second category. The bigger, more serious things. Should you not let these things bother you either? It seems you should not. Now what about when you're at fault? Should you let things bother you then? You failed your test because you didn't study. You gambled away your mother's savings. You rode over a cat. You embarrassed your best friend in public. You were disrespectful to your parent. Should you let these things bother you? Should you let these things bother you? Well, what would the benefit of that be? You don't want to do it again. So, will beating yourself up protect you from doing it again? Actually, in my experience, beating yourself up actually makes you more likely to do it again. Think about it. You were just disrespectful to your father, and you feel terrible. You're telling yourself how horrible you are that you speak to your own father that way. Your father walks into your room and tells you he will not tolerate such brazenness from you. What's your reaction? Do you apologize? Or do you blow up at him? What about if you were talking to yourself in a different way before he walks in? What if you were problem solving? You feel bad about what you said to him. You want to fix it. You realize that the way to fix it is by apologizing. But you don't want to just apologize. You want to make sure he won't do it again. You know he's likely to push your buttons in the future. So you come up with a plan for how you'll react when he pushes your buttons. And you figure out what works for you. Maybe it's that you won't take his criticism to heart. You'll tell yourself whatever it is that works for you not to be bothered. Then what happens when he comes in and tells you you're brazen? Which scenario will be more likely for you to apologize instead of blowing up at him? When you were bashing yourself for being so disrespectful, or when you were problem solving? So it seems that even when you're at fault for something, not letting it bother you is still a good idea. So when would not letting something bother you be bad advice? It seems that in all situations, you'll have more pleasure. You'll gain much more when things don't bother you. But we're left with one more situation, and that is when you can't. It might always feel better when things don't bother you, but the time that it won't feel better to tell yourself not to let something bother you is when you cannot control it. If you tell yourself not to be bothered and cannot accomplish that, you'll feel worse than if you're okay with being bothered. So really, it doesn't matter what category something is in. If it's petty, if it's big, if it's your fault, this will always apply if you are bothered about something and cannot get yourself to not be bothered. It will not be productive to tell yourself not to be bothered. What you need in this situation is to be okay with feeling bothered. And then what you need to do is understand why you're bothered. Something as petty as being called a name can hurt you to the core. You need to ask yourself why it hurts. What does it mean about you that someone called you stupid? Don't brush yourself off. If it bothers you, you deserve to understand why. Once you understand why, you can problem solve from there. For example, if you feel horrible after someone called you stupid, and you ask yourself why it feels so bad, you might realize that he just confirmed your lifelong suspicion that you were trying to hide from yourself, that you were always dumber than everyone else. That will give you a clue as to how to heal your feelings. If you really have less brains than most, ask yourself why that's not so bad. And the answer might come to you that brains are God-given, and you are not at fault for it. It doesn't make you any less of a person that God created you with this uniqueness. Or maybe when you ask yourself why someone calling you stupid makes you feel so terrible, you realize that it's not about what he said, but your reaction. You let him step all over you because you were afraid to stand up to him. Well, now you'd brainstorm down a whole different avenue. You're freezing up. Was that a good thing? Or can you figure out a better reaction next time? Bottom line, not being bothered by something is a good thing. It will help you have more pleasure. But forcing something good can have bad results. You need to be nice to yourself. Be your own best friend and figure out together with yourself how to achieve your purpose. Let's set out to do great things. You know you can.